Hello everyone, Thomas Fireheart here, and welcome to the first of what will hopefully be many episodes of a podcast of Ice and Fire. Joining me relative to where you are at the moment, night or day, is Graham Christensen, if I
Hiya.
pronounce that right. Maeve LeFay would be here, but I kind of started this one out of nowhere, so sorry, Maeve,
Well,
if
she
you
was
end up
given
seeing
an
this.
well, she was given an invitation, so
Yeah,
she might join us later. So whatever happens, happens.
yeah. So yeah.
hmm
If she turns up later, hooray. If not, then it'll unfortunately be a sausage fest. Otherwise, until we're able to properly organize, at least I am able to organize this a bit better and set like an actual time and day. But anyway, as you can tell by the title, whether you're watching this live or not, this is a season 1 retrospective, essentially, of Game of Thrones for the first episode, because I figured that it would be interesting just to, generally the idea for this came about when I just started rewatching the show as a sort of lead into season 5, because I realized when I watched season, oh no, that generally this sort of thing happened where I would forget stuff. So I figured it's better to get the show fresh in your mind when a new season's
Yeah.
coming up. So, but before we get to that, I did have an idea. It probably won't go as long since it's just me and Graham, but uh, I wanted to get your sort of story, Graham, on how you came to either generally get into the show or just generally this sort of world in general.
Well, I've always been a big fantasy fan for like pretty much ever since I was like 12 or 13 when I was first introduced to Lord of the Rings. Like pretty much anything like medieval fantasy I was into. But I didn't really know about the Song of Ice and Fire series until Game of Thrones started getting really huge.
Mm.
And I don't have HBO, so I kind of missed the boat when the first season came out. But all of my friends were like going absolutely nuts over it. And they were going like, "Graham, you gotta check out Game of Thrones. You gotta check out Game of Thrones." And I didn't get around into it until the first season came out on DVD. But
hmm
in the meantime, I did find out that it was a series of books, and I got the first book as a Christmas present. And I read that right before the first season came out on DVD, and I pretty like actually, and I got so hooked on it that I finished the whole thing in like almost 3 weeks, which I think is probably like the fastest I've ever read a book in comparison to like how many pages compared to least amount of
Yeah,
time. Like I think that book is like 650 pages, and I finished it in 3 weeks. like
damn.
like it didn't even take me that long to like finish the Harry Potter series. So
Mm.
and
Um,
then I just like marathon read the rest of the books, and I was pretty much ahead of the curve by the time season 3 came around.
okay, cool. Um, as far as I go, I had pretty much no real idea outside of like memes and some other stuff what the hell Game of Thrones was. Um, and I generally didn't watch it until season 3 was about to start. So, in about. Uh, I forget exactly how long it took me, but it took me about a week, or even maybe even less than that. To actually, yeah, no, it took me a few days to watch all of season 1, all of season 2, and catch up on season 3.
So you're
Because like,
really
well,
powering through it.
yeah, like I guess at the time I didn't have a job, and even now I don't. I only really work once a week, maybe more if they need me more often. So unlike most people, I had as much free time as possible. So I'm pretty sure I marathoned them like several episodes a day. Like when I first watched it, the first episode, I was like, well, I'll just load up one episode for now, just actually see if I give a shit. And then I'm pretty sure I probably either watched well, I wouldn't have watched the entire season that day, but I probably got through like the first 5 episodes in that one day. And that's one of the very few times that watching the first episode has actually hooked me enough to actually like want to watch it. Whereas like I'm probably going to get flack for this, but something like Breaking Bad took me halfway through the season for me to really get hooked.
Well, the first
The
episode
first
is pretty
season.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's kind of how it was for everybody else because I heard that when the first episode aired, like HBO gave them a second season solely based on the ratings of that episode alone,
wow.
which is virtually unheard of.
Mm. The only other kind of thing I've heard with that is an Australian prison drama called Wentworth that's actually on Netflix in the US. Um, got it's on its it got a second season on its sixth episode. It got a seventh second season announced after it had only done like 6 of the 10, like, well, 6 of the 10 episodes, so it had been out for a bit. But pretty much before the second season aired, they said they were already greenlit for a third season. So that's probably
Nice.
one of the few times I've heard of that sort of thing happening
Hmm.
along with that. But yeah, like, and the funny thing is I might be one of the few, but as much as I would love to read the books, and I've said this to people outside of podcasts and that, but I'm probably either not going to read the books at all until the show is over, or I will like start reading and then just sort of get up to where the show is now, and then just sort of stop and wait.
Yeah, I think the latter's
Mm.
probably a good strategy, but don't
Mm.
do what I do and read every single book back to back. Because by the time I got to book 4, I was just like completely burned out, and I was like, okay, who's this character?
Yeah,
Where's
like I figure I'd probably have that. Yeah, I'd probably have that problem too because I tried reading two of the Sword of Truth books. If anyone knows what that
and
series is,
plus those things are frickin' and plus those things are frickin' monsters. I think like
yeah,
Swords is like 920 something pages.
mm, yeah, like so like the funny thing is this the second Sword of Truth book is about as long as the Lord of the Rings is as a whole, and it's the second book in the fucking series. And the third one is like 800, and the first one is like 900 and something, and that's like the paperback editions.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's definitely something you got to
oof.
commit to.
Yeah, like I still haven't, and I'm probably gonna have to start over with the third one because I read the first one took me a while to read, the second one took me a while to read, and to the point that I just reread the first book, then reread the second one. And then started again, and then started with the third, but the third I'm gonna. But anyway, um, but yeah, as far as sorry, I guess in this case we'll probably sort of break it up into sections for talking about the seasons, I guess. So
Mhm.
for now we'll probably just give our opinions on like the general plot. Uh, in which, well, I guess if we try to summarize it, there's so fucking much shit going.
Yeah, if
um,
I can pretty much sum up the whole thing in one sentence. The king dies, and there are a whole bunch of royal families trying to claim the throne. That's pretty much the simple gist of everything,
Pretty
but
much. Yeah,
it's so much more complicated than that because there are
yeah,
like so many characters and the world that takes place is like so rich and really dense. It's got this whole history. There's like an entire there's like an entire list of minor characters that are like in the background doing their own thing. There's subplots within subplots within subplots, and
yeah.
and yeah, it does get really hard to like keep track of like stories and characters and plots and whatnot. Like like thank God the books came with like glossaries of like all the royal families and shit because if not, I probably would have quit like halfway through.
uh, yeah, like I think, and the funny thing is now I think about it, what actually initially sparked my interest in actually watching the show was a Nostalgia Critics thing that he did where he talked about some of his like favorite fictional characters and that, or generally like I forget if it was TV and movie or whatever, and like Tyrion was one of them.
Uh-huh.
And it actually, and just the scenes that he showed from that was like, oh, okay, this actually looks like it is worth watching.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, like actually, my first exposure to the TV show was like this montage on YouTube of like the best of Tyrion Lannister, and I was like, "That's it. I have to get involved in this show."
yeah, yeah. Um, the thing that I kind of love about this is that most of the actors I've never heard of, so I don't really
Mhm.
have much attachment to them at the same time. But that said, Robert Baratheon, um, it's weird with him because I didn't know that that actor was actually British. I thought because like I'd seen him in like he's in um the Flintstones live action prequel. He had a sitcom. I forget what the hell it was called. But generally, I'm used to hearing him with a very fluent sounding American accent. So it was interesting hearing him in his actual accent. But yeah, like watching this series back, I noticed that there is a lot of things that I probably did miss. Um, trying to pick up on them now, it's kind of annoying. But actually, I would say, and I probably should have said yes. There will obviously be spoilers for the show, and not just the season we're talking about, because as I'm about to prove, um, I realized something even just watching this season that it suddenly made sense why something happens in season 4, 3, 2, all that crap. Like, I never really picked up on the fact that, well, for one thing, it's something else, but I'll probably get into that in a different one. But I never really remembered that. Is it Jorah Mormont? Yeah.
Yeah,
Jorah
the one who keeps getting
actually,
friend zoned by Daenerys.
yeah, that he actually did betray her. I don't think I ever actually picked up on that in the first, because like it probably just because I was like binge watching it, probably just went straight over my head the first time I watched it.
Yeah, and plus,
So, um,
yeah, that's one of the things the series keeps doing. It just keeps bringing back plot points from like several
yeah,
seasons ago that almost everybody
yeah,
has forgotten about or were either dropped because that was resolved by the end of season one. He stopped trying to
mm,
spy on Daenerys and trying to send messages to Robert.
yeah,
So
like yeah, the thing where he essentially saves her from the poison was the bit where I was like, I figured he knew because, like, I figured he was just, like, had an inkling or something, but I never actually could retain the info that Lord Varys has basically said, yeah, he's working for us, he's a mole.
mhm.
Um, and then when I actually retained that and was like, oh, that's right. When it
Yeah,
got back to that scene, I was like, oh, now that makes sense.
yeah. There's like a whole bunch of moments like that in the entire series. Like,
Yeah, and it made the season 2 bit where the masked woman asks him, "Will you betray her again?" Because like when I watched that, I was like, "Wait a minute, what? Was that the thing that happened in season 2, or was that from season 1?" And then like rewatching, it's like, okay, now it also makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I actually never expected the Daenerys storyline to keep going after season 1. I honestly thought that she was gonna die, or like something was gonna happen that her story was just gonna go, just gonna end by that,
and
and like
then
something was gonna happen.
and then dragons.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
and it
that's
wasn't.
pretty much the thing about the that's pretty much the
Mm,
thing about the first season. Like as it
mm,
as it stands on its own, it's pretty much a great season and a great story. But in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty much just primer for everything else that happens.
yeah.
Like Danny's story, like easily could have ended there, but
Mm.
when once the dragons hatch, it's like it's only the beginning, bitches.
Pretty much. Um,
And the same thing when they killed Ned Stark at the end.
yeah.
Like he was pretty much set up as the main character,
Mm. Well, yeah,
but
like if anything, that's
then
yeah. If anything, that's why I like that they did that, because in any other show he would have lived, but they're trying to like essentially like I'm pretty sure even George R. R. Martin basically said it, that he doesn't really like that kind of trope either, where you're pretty much always like, nah, he's clearly they're clearly gonna live. They're the hero. So, like, if you watch, it's like a lot of criticism that some people have about Lord of the Rings. It's like, yeah, they're put in mortal danger, but they're the heroes, so you know they're gonna live. So when you really get that in your head about Game of Thrones, it's like when someone's even threatened with it, you're like, oh shit, they could actually die. Like anyone could die at any time.
yeah, that's
Um,
kind of become the running joke about the series and how fans
yeah.
are kind of saying like, don't get attached to any one character because they will die.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, that's the
like
irony. I
can you
usually become
imagine?
more attached.
Yeah, like if they actually killed Tyrion, I imagine there will be riots in the
Ooh,
streets.
yeah, that would be pretty messy to watch. Like that's the funny thing. There have been moments where it did look like he was gonna die, and I legitimately thought he was until like maybe I think like a friend spoiled something that happens in season 4 for me, so I knew he wasn't gonna die.
Yeah, I
But
guess they figured that.
there's been at least one moment a season where it looks like he could probably have been offed. Uh,
Yeah,
especially
I
in this
figured
one, and
that.
yeah, like especially in this season because we get the moment where he almost gets thrown, he almost falls off the edge of the Eyrie,
Yeah,
and also almost gets thrown through the Moon Gate, and luckily he luckily we get well he gets rescued. Plus we generally get. I hate it when like there are that many characters that even though you really like the character, you can't offhand remember who they are, or, like what their name is.
yeah,
Um,
and it kind of sucks because there are some characters that have like the same first name because like there's King Robert, but there's also Robb Stark. There's a
yeah,
whole bunch of Johns. There,
yeah. um, it's a it's a sellsword that helps Tyrion.
Bronn.
Yeah. Because like that always confuses me because there's a brand, so Bronn and Brand.
Yeah, and
Um,
actually, yeah, and spoilers for season 2. another character that comes in, Yara Greyjoy, who's the sister of another
Yeah.
character who I will mention right
Yeah,
now.
that's
But
kind of yeah.
yeah, in the book, her name is Asha, but they changed it to Yara
Ah,
because it sounds too much like Asha, the wildling chick who helps out Bran, which is
yeah.
kind of
Okay,
weird
yeah,
because
I
it
can.
sounds a lot
Yeah,
like Arya.
yeah, like yeah, especially because Arya's name is usually pronounced different depending on who's saying it.
Hmm.
Considering uh Catelyn pretty much pronounces it as Aya, like there is no R in there. So that's always I've always found that kind of odd, but I guess it kind of also helps because it's like an accent thing.
Yeah, I was just
'Cause,
gonna
like
say because Michelle Fairley, who plays Catelyn, is Irish, so it would make sense
yeah,
that she would pronounce it that way.
um,
Whereas like
mm,
whereas all the rest of the actors are either English or Scottish.
yeah, um, and generally the whole like I kind of like the whole the wall plot really, and the fact that Jon Snow, as like it's been said before in like actual like interviews and shit, but like the idea that he's pretty much got in his head that this is like a fucking wonderful place or something to be and like very honorable and all that shit. And even Tyrion points out to him that like when they three characters that I didn't even really realize until they show up, I think until we actually get to the wall, that at least one of those characters becomes a major wall character, and yet he's one of the rapists. So like, and yet we end up liking him. So it's like, well, that's a bit weird. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
and
like
it also kind of plays into like upending everybody's expectations because John is
yeah,
expecting it to be like this great honorable thing when in reality it's just a good alternative to being thrown in a dungeon or having your head chopped off.
yeah,
Because like most of
or
the
at
people are
yeah,
either like dishonored lords and knights or people who don't want their dicks cut off.
yeah, yeah. Like, well, even as they say, like Tyrion's Tyrion says, rapists. They like yeah, like they got the option of castration or the wall. Most choose the knife. And it's like that really like if that didn't clue John into what he was getting into, then like yeah, because like from what I remember from either interviews or if they flat out sort of state it in the show, essentially the wall, used to be like an honorable thing and kind of almost like a
Yeah.
sort of uh, not necessarily compulsory, but sort of like a military service kind of thing, where you could
Uh-huh.
just kind of go there for a few years or something, or just generally if you knew, oh, that was it. It was like, I think it was even George R. R. Martin kind of pointing it out. It was like, if you were like, I guess kind of in John's position or like Brand's position or uh, the other one, like I can never
Yeah.
remember the youngest.
I don't know
But if
about
you
it
were
being
one
like
of,
just for a few. I don't know about it just being for a couple of years. I think it's always a
oh
life
yeah,
sentence.
well yeah, like
But yeah,
but yeah,
yeah,
it was like an honorable
but back
thing
in
to
the glory
do.
days of the Night's Watch, back in the glorious days of the Night's Watch, it was considered like a place where the bastard son of of Lord or the youngest son of a Lord who doesn't really have that much to inherit can go up to the wall and still serve the country in some significant way.
Yeah,
As the but as their numbers just like started dwindling, it just became what it is now.
yeah, well they pretty much just take anyone they can get.
Yeah. And personally,
um,
for me, the Night's Watch story, uh, since we're talking about the first season, in the first season, I think it's kind of the weakest overall because
mm,
it's pretty much all establishment. Like it doesn't really start
yeah,
picking up until 2 and 3 when they like go to the other side of the wall and start interacting with the wildlings.
yeah,
But yeah,
and yeah,
when
but
it
like
comes,
it, yeah, and it mainly
uh,
has, aside from like the two key moments where the extended cold opening in the first episode where characters we don't know about and are never important again because they die. Basically, find out that there are that the White Walkers are coming back, and again when that happens, but it happens on the wall. There's like two very sort of, even though the overall story is yeah, as you said, basically kind of just set up. There's like those two key moments where they're establishing the White Walkers, and that it's that much of a threat that they have to go and do something about it. Generally.
Yeah. Yeah, but for me, the best storylines in season 2 were Ned Stark's story becoming the new Hand in King's Landing, Tyrion's story because he gets to like go all over the place. Like he starts off in Winterfell, he visits the Wall for a while, then on his way back to King's Landing, he gets captured by Catelyn, taken to the Eyrie, then taken over to the Val with his father, and he's just like awesome all the way through. But I also really like the beginning of Daenerys' story because, like, compared to how we know she is now, like right now she's like this big conquering badass who doesn't take shit from anybody. But at the beginning, she's just like this. She's just like this demure little girl who does whatever her brother says, is being sold off to a man that she doesn't even know, and she's like scared of him at first. Well, of course she is, because he's like raping her every night. but then she gets accepted by the Dothraki. They all turn on Viserys. By the way, his death is probably one of the most satisfying. That guy was such a fucking prick.
I don't really want to bring it up for sake of the fact that we'll probably, like, when we get to season 4, and then we'll really go into it, but aside from Joffrey's death, this has been the most satisfying one so far.
Yes.
Because like you just so with Viserys' death, it's just like you really hate this fucker, because especially when he just flat out says, "I would let his entire army fuck you if it meant that I'd get what I want," and like she's like just feels so helpless, and then just, you know, she actually, like, the funny thing is, I guess, is she's one of the few characters that really does, aside from maybe kind of Jon Snow, because he has to be humbled and then realize he's got to start from the bottom and work his way up, even though he comes from a background where he would have just shown up, where he thought he would have just shown up at the wall and been given everything. And he has to realize through character progression that he's actually got to earn all this shit.
Right.
And Daenerys starts off as the timid little flower and turns into the mother of dragons in the last episode, and it's like, at least by that, and like even like I remember cheering, even just rewatching this, cheering when she finally stands up to Viserys and is like, "If you strike me again, I will have you killed," essentially. Like, and just so calmly watches her brother dying, because she's figured out, no, it's not his destiny, it's mine.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and aside from his. Yeah, while his death was the most satisfying, Khal Drogo's death was also probably the most heartbreaking. Like everybody goes on about how Ned Stark was like the big game changer, and it was in terms of like plot and taking everybody by surprise. But that was in terms of like the main character is like not allowed to die, which that rule they're just like completely breaking. But there's also the kind of unspoken rule where the badass has to live, because because right out the gate, Khal Drogo is just like this big, beefy, manly man badass who could like
Yeah.
kill you with his pinky. And how does he die? From an infected boo boo.
Mm. And watching that back was interesting too because you realize the only reason that that witch woman gets involved is because she realizes she can get back at the Dothraki that way.
Yeah,
Because she
exactly.
basically makes it worse. And they know that she's making it worse, but Daenerys is just completely oblivious to it because she's too good-natured by then. And even though she burns the woman, she like continues to kind of have that problem where she's well, she becomes less forgiving, but at first she's basically that naive. Even though she's starting to come into her own, she's that naive that she doesn't realize what the hell's happening, even though it's kind of obvious to everyone else. Um,
Yeah, by season 3 and 4, her story kind of becomes more about like walking that line between kindness and forgiveness, and like being a good leader, like being like the whole is it better to be feared or loved kind of Machiavellian thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
going back to Khal Drogo, like going back to the whole Daenerys thing with him, it was also kind of devastating for everybody because his character kind of took everybody by surprise. Like everybody knew he was a badass right out the gate, but during those first 2 episodes, he wasn't really treating her very nice. I mean, it is
yeah,
kind of par for the course. Like that's how they have. That's how he treats them in like the Rocky culture. But at the
yeah,
beginning, like there was like no communication. He was like raping her every single night. But once Daenerys like starts to become more domineering and more assertive, like they really start to become a really great couple. So
yeah.
there's also that factor.
Mm. And the funny thing is like you could really, in any other situation, this would come off as like just Stockholm syndrome. And really, the irony is that it's more of her just trying to do the opposite of what he's doing. He's basically just using her, and she ends up deciding that she wants to do the reverse.
Yeah,
And then it just somehow ends up turning into an actual relationship.
yeah.
Um, let's see, what else is there?
All right,
Generally,
let's talk about the Starks for a minute.
mm,
'Cause, like they're pretty much at the center of everything when
yeah.
the show begins. You start.
uh, well, like I guess the funny thing is that they actually do come off like an actual family, rather than just like like you can tell they're obviously just sort of acting with all just like the little bits and pieces that happen where like they kind of have a go at Bran for not being able to shoot properly, and the fact that Arya just kind of out of nowhere gets a bullseye and then just sort of curtsies and runs off.
Yeah,
um,
and plus, yeah, and I really did like the whole family dynamic that they had going on. I thought like the marriage between Ned and Catelyn was really great. I thought the relationship
yeah,
between the siblings was really great. I didn't really like how Catelyn treated Jon. Like, but pretty much
yeah,
everybody agrees on that.
yeah.
Uh, but
But at
I
the
mean, at
same
the same time,
time, in a way, yeah, in the same time, in a way, it also gives her a bit of a darker tone to her because Game of Thrones essentially is all about shades of grey rather than just sort of black and white. Aside from like a few characters, it's mainly sort of grey area characters. So her being an asshole to Jon Snow kind of fits into that.
yeah, you'd be surprised how many people really hate Catelyn. Like, I
uh,
get why she's so loved. I mean, like
mm,
I kind of get it, but at the same time, it does kind of like run on the gray line. Like she is a great mother, and she'll like do really anything to like keep her family safe and together. but at the same time, she does it like at the risk of jeopardizing everything else. Like
Yeah,
the whole reason she has Tyrion sent to the Eyrie is based on like a whole hypothetical thing.
yeah,
Like like when she finds a dagger and Littlefinger tells him like maybe it belongs to Tyrion, and then they just run into
yeah,
each other at the tavern. It was like she fucks everything up on a based on a red herring.
yeah, pretty much. And really,
Yeah,
in a
and
way, you could argue that, like, I'm pretty sure it was never actually stated, but I always figured that it was pretty much a case of Cersei trying to frame Tyrion and then in a way that would end up with him dying and she'd get away scot-free. Because she's the one
yeah,
that's always parent. Because, like, yeah, like, Jamie really doesn't give a shit about it. Like,
right.
he's just like, and he even, like, sort of casually pushes Bran off the. Which, that might be one of the sort of best endings to a first episode of a show I've ever seen, where he's just like, well, this
Yeah.
kid saw me fucking my sister, so I guess I might as well. And just like even just the
So down you
delivery of that
go.
line, yeah. And like we almost think that's the first bit of the show, but it's not. All he ends up with is the weird thing though is they sort of present that at first as like he only had one broken leg in the dialogue when I like was hearing like in later episodes, but it must be both, I guess, because he doesn't seem to kick around with one at all. So I guess they just kind of
No,
go with a sense
no.
of both. But
I think he
yeah,
did like I think he like landed on his spine or something, and he's like paralyzed from the
yeah,
waist down.
yeah. Like yeah, I think that's it. But I
Mhm.
think some of the dialogue at one point just kind of didn't really allude to that well enough, maybe, or just it. I might have just misheard it, but it sounded like they only um, alluded to one leg being broken, but it was generally he wouldn't have been able to walk again anyway because this is fantasy, so it's not like he could have like a leg replaced or friggin' or I guess in this case legs replaced or somehow fixed unless they use magic, I guess. But the idea is that until the dragons are born, magic's kind of gone from the world.
Yeah,
Um,
and even if it wasn't, it's still it's still a medieval setting, so he's
yeah,
pretty much screwed in that way.
yeah,
And plus, if he did, then plus if he did get his legs fixed, there'd be no story.
yeah.
And so yeah, let's
Um,
move on to like some of the other ones,
hmm,
like with Arya and Sansa Stark. Like I
yeah.
think the thing I kind of like about Sansa is well, like a lot of other characters, she's grown a lot, but like at the beginning,
Mm,
like pretty much everybody kind of hated her. Like she wasn't
yeah.
really malicious or anything. She was just guilty
Mm.
of
Well,
just being
yeah. She was basically just the fantasy slash medieval version of a whiny teenager.
yeah, she's basically like a Disney princess at this point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and she's just like going on and on about how she and Prince Joffrey are in love and they'll get married and she'll be a
Yeah.
queen and she's destined to have his
Mm,
babies and he's a beautiful lion and then he turns out to be the most
mm. And what I love
beautiful
is that she
character
doesn't
in
care
history.
either at first. Like there's a moment in the later in the season where um like generally yeah, it's like the episode where Ned's basically realized that he's fucked
Yeah.
and he's telling him that he's going to send him away and they both don't want to now because they actually like it. And like Sansa's just kind of like no, I'm supposed to stay here and get married to Joffrey and have his babies, and Arya's reaction of just saying 7 hells is just like so fucking hilarious. And then like she goes on, they're like, I'll give you a, it's like, I'll pay you up with a, and Ned's like, no, I'll make it up to you, I'll pay you up with someone who's actually worthy of you. It's like, I don't want someone who's brave and all that, I want Joffrey, and like you just see Arya.
Yes,
And like
I love
Arya's
that
just
part.
yeah, like Arya's just like, you do realize what you just said, with like just with the expression on her face, it's like I can't believe, like even she realizes that what Sansa said is so fucking
I think
dumb.
even Ned Stark was laughing at, was like trying to say things after that.
Yeah. Um.
But
And like
yeah, like by
yeah,
the end
and
of
even
that,
like
all of that is
yeah.
by
Mm,
the end of that, all of that is pretty much gone.
yeah.
Like in the last episode of the season where Joffrey is showing her, is like making her look at Ned's head
Mm,
on a pike. He's like standing on this bridge on the like this little bridge thing,
yeah. Yeah.
and she just has this face where she's like, push him, push
Yeah.
him, push him.
And like the
No,
only
I'm not
reason
gonna
she
break any.
doesn't is the only
Yeah,
reason she
I know I'm
doesn't is
not
because
break.
Thingo stops
I know
her.
I'm not breaking any ground by saying this, but I fucking hate Joffrey.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Like, you know what?
like
The funny thing
every
is
time.
Joffrey.
No, 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 no. Every time I see that fucker's face, I just go, fuck you, fuck you, like impulsively.
Yeah. Like
He's
he
just
might
got like
actually
one of
be.
those faces,
Yeah. Like the funny thing is
and he doesn't get any better.
he's one of the few fictional characters that I legitimately hate because they're such a good villain. Like usually these kinds of villains are like generally like, well played villains. Like even Tywin Lannister, he's a complete asshole, but he's just so witty and charming that you kind of like him.
Yeah,
And even like Jamie Lannister, he's such a fucking prick, but he's so hilarious. He's like fucking a fantasy Han Solo kind of deal where he's a complete asshole, but he's so charming and witty in that it just kind of you end up liking him. And I guess in the show, over the course of the show, you're supposed to grow to like him
yeah,
somewhat at least.
yeah, and
Anyway,
Cersei is like kind of in the same boat. Like, I
yeah.
mean, well, actually, I kind of take that back. She starts off a
Well,
disgusting bitch and
she's
ends a
kind of
disgusting bitch.
redeemable in the fact that even she realizes that like Joffrey killing Ned Stark was going too far.
Yeah,
Because
but well, the thing is, like, I read the books first, and I wait. How far? You said you got into book 4, right? Or what?
oh
Sorry, I
no, I
kind of.
haven't read it. I haven't read any.
Okay, well, in
Yeah.
book 4, Cersei becomes a POV character, and
Hmm.
she goes from like someone who you like kind of get the benefit of the doubt for like. Okay, I love the show Cersei way more than the book Cersei because none of that self-realization is there. Like she is like
Okay.
completely delusional. Like she thinks
Okay.
that she thinks that Robert is just a drunken bastard. She thinks that Joffrey is just like a perfect little angel. She thinks that she's convinced that Tyrion is like
Okay.
always plotting to kill her. And
Hmm. So basically, her season one attitude is basically her entire book attitude.
um,
In
yeah,
the
pretty
sense that,
much.
like, yeah, in the sense that she kind of puts on a face in public, but would otherwise just sort of blindly believe that what she's doing is actually going to work out.
Yeah, and
Where,
yeah, actually, you know what? One of my favorite scenes in season 1 that wasn't in the book is the conversation that Cersei and Robert have together. Like right after Robert had fired Ned, uh, she and
mm,
uh, Robert and Cersei kind of had this whole discussion about like what would happen if the Dothraki came over to Westeros, and it just kind of transitions into this discussion about about their marriage and how it's all hold how it's the only thing that's pretty much holding the Seven Kingdoms together. And she keeps
Yeah.
asking about no, she asked about Ned's sister who he was originally in love with,
Yeah.
and one of my favorite parts of that was the end where she asks, "Was there ever any a chance for us?" And he just looks at her and says, "No." Like I love
Mm.
that scene. It's so good.
Yeah. Like. And the fact that she like there's a scene with I forget if she either says it in that scene or like she kind of briefly touches upon it in that scene, but then in the scene where um, Ned basically comes to her and tells her what he knows, she basically says that she did actually love him once, and it was like, wow, great, I get to marry this friggin' gallant knight who's just like this big burly warrior who's fucking amazing and all this shit, and then he
Yeah,
kind of ruins the image for us. So
yeah, because like before he was like he was this big badass who like pretty much dethroned the king, and now
yeah,
he's just like turned to like this fat lazy drunk who thinks that being the king pretty much means he gets to do whatever he wants scot free,
yeah,
which
which
he learns the hard
unfortunately is
way
a
isn't yeah,
yeah,
he learns the
and
hard way that's not
unfortunately
exactly what it is.
yeah, and is unfortunately a trait that he ends up sort of passing on to Joffrey in a way.
Yeah, but you know what? I do remember like on his deathbed he said that he wanted to make Ned the Lord Regent until
Yeah,
Joffrey comes of age, and he does kind of regret not trying to teach Joffrey
yeah,
uh, the 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 mistakes that he had to make. But
yeah. And
yeah,
generally, like, well, yeah, he even says it to Joffrey's like, I'm I'm sorry that I wasn't really there for you. Like, I wasn't
hmm
really a proper father to you. Should have taught you how to be a man, and all this other stuff. Which the that's one of the funny interactions from like earlier in the season when they're heading back from Winterfell and Ned and the girls are going with them, and there's the whole thing where the first bit where you see that Joffrey's a fucking asshole when he cuts that the butcher boy's face, and then Arya
yeah.
just kind of tackles him and hits him with a friggin' wooden with a stick or whatever, and just like and generally the dog and like the wow, I'm really blanking on stuff today.
Yeah.
Um, the dire wolf, that's it, has a go, and she has basically forces the dire wolf to fuck off because otherwise it's going to be killed. And we like there hasn't really been a follow up to that I've seen yet. That that dire wolf has not shown up again since, and it's implied that it gets away, so they never get it. So
Well,
I'm just wondering kind of what the will happen
yeah.
there.
I don't know if they're really gonna pick it up, but in the books, Arya does kind of have recurring dreams where she's like seeing things from her direwolf's perspective. So it's kind of hinted that
Okay.
she has. So it's kind of hinted that she has warp powers, just like Bran does. But
Okay.
since they're so far apart, they were never able to to really develop that. And I
Yeah.
think they kind of just dropped it all together in the show.
Mm. Because in a way, I kind of figured that the further north Arya gets in like the later seasons again, they probably would have ran into it again. But yeah, that was something I only really realized rewatching the season again recently. Um, but yeah, like that whole moment afterwards where they're in the tent and and Roberts just turns to Joffrey and he's like, "You let that little girl disarm you." It's so fucking hilarious. Uh,
Hmm.
and generally, like, um, I kind of like the little moment that John and Arya have, considering they only really have that like one scene together where um he gives her needle,
Hmm.
which becomes like a sort of major thing. So, like just that whole little interaction was great, and um, oh, there was something else. Oh, generally in this entire season and like in the entire show, I guess in a way we can probably move on to talking about characters specifically since we kind of have, rather than just general plot details.
Yeah.
Lord Varys might be my favorite character on the show, if not like sort of second only to Tyrion.
Yeah, I mean Tyrion's pretty much everybody's favorite character, but yeah, Varys
Mm,
is really great. Like
yeah,
a couple years ago, I was having a discussion with another friend of mine, and I asked the question, who is the most powerful character in the show? And it kind of became this debate about like maybe it's Robert because he's the king, but in truth, there are other characters who are really pulling the strings behind the scenes, mainly Varys and Littlefinger. And I
yeah,
really love the discussions that they have together, like in the throne room where everybody else is gone,
yeah,
because like Varys like knows all the secrets, and Littlefinger like knows how to manipulate everything. Like
mm,
no, it's like Varys has all the secrets, and Littlefinger has all the money. That's the thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like even when right at the end where like they're sort of like they set it up and then redo it right at the end of the season where Ned really should have not, and I like that's the kind of thing that I like, that it's he's not like the stereotypical hero that won't fall for anything, or like in a way he kind of is because he just doesn't go against his morals. He's like kind of considers himself to be on a moral high ground, and at first Cersei doesn't think he's a threat because of that.
Yeah, and
But
that's
like
basically
she does and then doesn't, and then does again when he just comes out and says, "I know that, like, I know that uh, all your children aren't Roberts, so I'm going to tell him that." And she
but yeah,
basically doesn't really give a crap, but at the same time, kind of plots against him.
yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing with him. Like, what ultimately becomes his downfall is that he's too honorable and he's too trusting, and he keeps
Yeah,
expecting other people to like abide to the same code of honor that he does.
yeah,
Like,
um,
like I mean, I'm pretty sure that being honorable and everything won him Robert's rebellion, but King's Landing is a completely different battlefield than Winterfell.
yeah,
Let's put it
yeah,
that way.
yeah. Like, yeah, it's kind of like it's like you're not up in the north anymore. You've got you've got to at least do
Yeah.
some stuff. Like, and even like generally when Varys is just talking to him in the dungeons and that, and he's just like, who do you serve then? And Varys is just like, the realm. Someone has to. It's just like, he's in on it, but like he'll like Varys is kind of very upfront to him about, yeah, I'll let you rot here, but that's because I'm safe. And it's like, as much as I want to get you out of this mess, I'm not going to risk my neck when my head will probably end up in the same basket as yours if I help you out. So, and like,
Yeah.
um, and just generally, like, it's all about they want to clutch onto what power they have and try to get more. And like hell, generally Littlefinger, I kind of you kind of figure the whole time he's going to.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's still kind of like, oh, why? Like,
Yeah.
at least, you know why, but it's like, he's just completely pulled one over on him, and it's like, told you you shouldn't have trusted me. Uh,
Yeah, and
um,
and pretty much the only reason he does trust Littlefinger is because Catelyn gives him her word, and
yeah,
unbeknownst to both of them, the only reason Littlefinger is helping them out at all is because he wants to get into his wife's pants. So
yeah. um, and yeah, like, even as something that always kind of confused me though, at least that I only really picked up on maybe rewatching it this time, was the fact that they say several times that Joffrey isn't of age yet, but yet he gets crowned, and like for the rest of the seasons, or at least for the rest of like this and kind of into the second, he's acting as if he is, and it's like, well, wait a minute, if he's not of age to be king yet, why the hell are they giving him so much fucking power and just not having Cersei rule everything? Because ironically, if I was Cersei, I'd be
because
getting
Cersei
rid
can.
of my children because they're the ones that are going to take the power away from you. If you're Queen Regent, you've got all the power.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the one thing that like Cersei does have in common with Catelyn is that she loves her children so much that she would pretty much let the entire world burn just so they can
Yeah,
be safe. But
yeah,
I think the major difference is where uh, where Catelyn doesn't really think about the repercussions of like trying to sabotage everything to keep her kids safe. Cersei is completely aware of the repercussions and just plain doesn't give a shit. Like
yeah,
if she's in power, if her kids are safe, I don't care if the rest of the world burns to the ground. That's pretty much her.
yeah, pretty much. Or like, or like if she does seem to care, it's kind of like, well, we could have used this to our advantage kind of stuff. Like, oh, why'd you kill Ned Stark? We could have used him to get your Uncle Jamie back. That kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Which I forgot happened right at the end of the first season. I thought that was completely a second season story. So
Well,
that
yeah,
was,
yeah. I mean, in the books, there it was like this entire chapter, and there's this whole other book, like or this whole other battle, but like they didn't like have the funds to shoot the whole thing. Like one of my
yeah,
favorite things uh, was like right when the Starks and Lannisters were about to have their first battle. Uh, Tyrion is like giving all the hill tribes this whole pep speech and rallying them up, and then they just charge into battle. They trample him. He gets knocked out with a hammer, and then when he comes to, the battle's already over.
yeah, yeah. So essentially, it's kind of like a Hobbit moment during the Battle of the Five Armies, where in the book, Frodo, sorry, not Frodo, Bilbo is wait, like he's there for the start of it, but then gets like hit in the head with a rock or something and just passes out.
Yeah,
And then he comes to, and it's like been over for like a day, or well, not a day, but like it's been over for a while.
yeah. And
I
the only
forget
reason
it. Like, was that season one or was that season two?
it was season one,
Okay, because like I kind of
but
forget, but it's funny because it works. Because like, yeah, they meant to have it, but in a way, not having a major battle until the second season kind of helped them.
yeah, I mean, I read somewhere like the only reason that they didn't film it was because like they didn't have enough money to film a battle scene yet,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were kind of like saving it for the Battle of Blackwater. And
yeah,
but in the book, the battle was like this entire chapter, like he's right up there in the front lines, and he like ends up accidentally like impaling like killing a horse with like the spike on his helmet or something. It's actually pretty great.
uh, um, yeah, like generally, like Tyrion's story is. like, I'm just kind of glad that we ended up getting Bronn out of that because
Yeah,
some of the like normally like most conversations involving Tyrion are usually the most entertaining, but generally the banter between him and Bronn is like some of the funniest stuff they have.
absolutely.
And it's like, and even just like the bit where it's like they haven't really been together very long, and like he's like, well, I'll stick with you until he's like, probably until someone pays. Is like, like just sort of setting up the fact that like he could probably Bronn could pretty much turn on him on any time if he was paid enough. And Tyrion's just like, well, just remember, if anyone ever tries to pay you to, you know, do that, I can beat their price, essentially. It's like, well, that's what
Yeah,
you're
I
with me
really do
for,
like
so.
how. Yeah, I really do like how their relationship started off as pretty much strictly business, but over time they did develop this mutual respect for each other.
Yeah. Um, and even the interesting thing I find is that I remember reading somewhere that Shay in the books compared to the show is almost completely different. Like essentially just a show Shay is basically like a completely new character, just with a name that happens to be taken from the. Oh, I think it is. It's either that or they might have even just changed. Oh
Well,
no, wait, no.
no,
Um,
no, 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 no. You're right. She does change a lot from the books in that
yeah.
she is a lot more active in the plot. Like once like in book two in Clash of Kings, she doesn't really do that much. She like in the show, the way they decide to hide her is like hide her in the Red Keep and have her like disguised as a service wench.
Yeah.
Where in the book she's like hiding out in this house over in the city that Tyrion had for her that she's
Ah,
keeping.
okay.
No, it was in like one of the brothels over there. But they
Okay.
decided that they decided that they had this great character. We're gonna do a lot more with her.
Yeah.
And in some ways I do think the way they do it in the show is a lot more effective.
Hmm. And the funny thing is, even like I forget. I think it was like when I was rewatching season two, because I'm basically up to rewatching season three at the moment. Um, when I was rewatching season two, for the hell of it, I rewatched the Blackwater episode from season two with the director's commentary on, and it's George R. R. Martin doing the commentary, and he
Mhm.
pretty much admits that he actually kind of, in a way, prefers without like flat out admitting that he thinks it's necessarily a better character. I think he essentially says that he really likes what they've done with the character, and like
Yeah.
in kind of in his own way admits that they handle the character better than he does. And I think he's actually said that he's wanted to sort of, or he wanted to, or he wish he could have, or it might have been Osha actually, where
Mhm.
he said that he basically wanted to go back and kind of modify that character a bit because of the sort of the effect the show version had on him.
No, you're
Um,
right. It was with OSHA. Like I
hmm.
remember reading somewhere that he said that he liked Natalia Tena's performance so much that she's gonna beef up her role in the book so she can stay on the show.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Um, and, yeah, like I guess the main reason they were against it initially was just the fact that she's like Osha's supposed to be like a lot older and sort of thing, isn't she, in the books?
I think so. At this point, I stopped trying to
Mm.
keep track of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it just shows how into the character she got too, because I did not realize until like I think it might have been like last year because I got into the show like in 2013, but like I'm pretty sure it was like not until last year that I realized that this was the same woman who played Tonks in the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me a while to
Oh,
realize that too.
yeah, I was like, holy
Oh,
shit, what?
and Walder Frey is Filch.
Yeah, like that stood out pretty easy to me because he essentially kept the same voice.
Yeah.
And the same kind of crusty old man kind of character.
Yeah.
Which anything he did was hilarious. Um, and the funny thing is, looking back at season one, I'm not surprised Theon turned on them at all. Because
Yeah.
they all kind of take jabs at him about, oh, you're not really part of this family kind of thing, like John gets, and generally like giving him shit or like, oh, I thought you like, kind of,
Well, it's pretty much
um,
everybody else.
yeah,
Yeah, he is pretty much just a hostage there, but they at least most of the people, well, not most of the people, but like the people that really mattered, treated him well. Like Ned Stark
yeah,
treated him really well. Rob treated him really well. I'm pretty sure John didn't really have any problems with him, but
mm,
pretty much everybody else kept reminding him that he was pretty much their prisoner. And I really like that
yeah,
scene where he uh, where he saves Bran from the wildlings by shooting one of them with an arrow, and Rob's first response was like that was really reckless. You could have killed him, and Theon was like, I just saved your brother's life. Thank you would be nice.
yeah, yeah. Like it was like on one hand you kind of could almost agree with
Hmm.
Rob, but at the same time it is like, well, you wouldn't have time to think. You have to act. So
Yeah,
you can kind of I guess that's just it. It's a very good argument in the sense that you could take either person's side. It's not, no, we could have totally done this without killing that guy. Because the irony is I honestly do side with Theon in that you kind of would have had to, because if he hadn't killed him and just wounded him, then he could have still slit his throat. So,
yeah, but in the end, all he really wanted was a little gratitude.
yeah. Um, and I guess that's a funny thing. He kind of goes, Theon's just kind of there at first, and then ends
Yeah,
up Um, even though like yeah, he's kind of mainly in the background. Even though I like the little moment that he like, pretty much I like most of the moments he has with Rob, where like when he decides to call in the Bannermen and his hand shake and like Theon's like, "You scared?" And Rob just looks at his hand shaking so much and he's like, "I guess so." And then then Theon's just like, "Good. It means you're not stupid."
yeah. Yeah, and I kind of get
uh,
how some people would probably like get them confused, like because like not only are there like so many different characters you have to keep track of, but like there are like three handsome 20-something white guys all in Winterfell with curly hair, and yeah, like I actually remember this. I remember this one skit in College Humor where it's pretty much like an 8-bit recap of the first season, and there's this one thing where Theon was like telling Rob to call his Bannerman. He's like, "Wait, I thought you were Rob. No, I'm Theon. But I thought I was Theon. So wait, who's John?" It's like, and then it says like, "Who is this character?" And then it says like, "Is it Rob? Is it Theon? Is it Hodor?"
uh,
Yep.
Uh, um, let's see, what is there? If there is anything else left, I'm trying
I
to
think we
think
pretty
now.
much covered everything.
Hmm. Um,
Well, everything for season one at least.
Mm. Well, I guess one notable thing left to bring up is generally, generally I kind of like, and I know like most people like Arya anyway, but I like how they handled the, oh, I don't want to do all this girly shit kind of thing, because normally that can be very cliche,
Hmm.
but luckily they did it in such a way, and I guess to an extent the character was written in the books in such a way that it was easy to draw from, that it just doesn't come off as, oh, why are you forcing me to do all this girly crap? I don't want to do this. I want to fight and shoot arrows and all that shit. And that, like, Ned kind of humors her, essentially. He's like, well, if you want to do it, then fine. We'll have to show you how to use this. And they're like,
Yeah.
I think it's all, yeah, it's like, and it's also like partially that he realizes her actually being able to defend herself would be a good idea considering they're in King's Landing.
Yeah. And plus, it introduced us to Serial Pharrell,
Yeah.
who is badass.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
like,
and there's
hmm,
no. Go ahead.
like that. Even watching that back, it's like, God, why did that character have to die? Or at least we're left to assume that he did, and I would be really
Yeah,
shocked if he didn't.
yeah.
So
There
it's like,
are fan
oh,
theories.
God.
Yeah,
Hmm.
there are fan theories that he's like still alive or and other stuff. But if we go into that, we'll be here all night.
um, but yeah, like, and generally, like, she kills her first person, where it's just like some random kid that's like one of Cersei's, I'm guessing, spies. Um, and just like it's so quick too. It's just like she turns around, happens to have the sword in her hand, and just drives it straight through him. And it's
Hmm.
like even she's like, holy shit. And then like in the right before the end of the season, she's just even having like threatening the the other kid with it. Where it's like, I've already killed one fat boy. I like killing fat boys. She's like just intimidating him so badly, and then like they run into oh, what's his name? God damn it! It's like that is kind of the sort of the double-edged sword of, of an ensemble cast this big, and it's like
Yeah.
it makes you realize why so many characters get cut, like
Hmm.
or like merged into other characters. It's like, okay, yeah, it probably would be extremely hard to keep track. Like, if I've been rewatching this lately and I still can't remember certain characters' names,
Yeah.
especially because this is a character that's like showing up at the moment. Because I think I'm up to like the Brotherhood Without Banners stuff of season 3 at the moment.
Hmm.
So um, the character, like the blacksmith bastard, essentially. I've
Gendry.
just that's it.
Gendry. His name's
Gendry,
Gendry.
yeah. Like, and I guess that's just it. Some of them have easier names to remember.
Hmm.
But yeah, like his whole thing, where he's just kind of, for all we knew, he could have just been shown that once, just so we knew that, oh shit, she's looking for, or Joffrey is looking for Ned Stark's. Sorry, not Ned. Robert's
Robert.
bastard children.
Hmm.
Um, but so basically, so Ned can find that out, so it clues us into that's what she's doing. Um,
Well, they do that the first episode of season two,
mm,
and plus they already established that he is Rob's bastard. So, all
yeah,
right, I
yeah,
think we
like
pretty much covered it. I think we pretty much
yeah,
covered everything.
yeah. So okay, so yeah, pretty much overall thoughts. I'd say it's it's hard to really call this a weak season unless you compare it to like all the seasons after it, in the sense that this is kind of like I argue Toy Story, which is a weird comparison, but in the sense that it gets better with each uh, part in the franchise. So, like, most people would argue Toy Story 2 is better than 1, and then 3 is better than 2. And in this case, it's like, Season 1 is great, and instead of being, like, all downhill from here, it's, like, there are some bits in every season that are kind of iffy, but for the most part, the quality of the show just keeps going up. The longer you go
Yeah,
into it, and
yeah. I don't really like rank the seasons, but I do think this was a great first season in that the
yeah,
way it just like establishes everything.
yeah,
Because like right after that, almost everything that happens here is pretty much just set up. But if you like
mm,
watch it on its own and like judge it on its own merits, it is a great season and a great story and
yeah.
great
And
everything.
if anything, just generally a great setup, because most of the times you'd have to deal with, especially when the episodes are all either over an hour long slightly or almost an hour long.
Hmm.
It's like that's a hell of a lot of setup to sit through, like essentially 10 to 11 hours of setup. Um,
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, it's kind of like with The Hobbit or Ender's Game or a lot of other first books, like,
mm,
where it's a great story on its own, but in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it is all just set up.
yeah,
But it's
but
still, like, great when you judge it on its own.
yeah, because like it's setup that doesn't get boring at all when it's basically just the exposition season,
Exactly.
just to set everything up. Yeah, and like
Mhm.
I think in some cases the like yeah, like there are some characters that you kind of think that you won't necessarily like, or that will
Mhm.
kind of get annoying, and like most people have turned on Jon Snow by this point. I haven't,
Mhm.
but like kind of because he's got characters to work off of now.
Yeah,
And
the first season, he's
generally,
pretty much just,
yeah,
like, all pouty and stuff.
yeah. But then he gets stuff to actually do, and it kind of works.
Yeah.
Um, In a way, I actually think Daenerys was a character that I was probably not going to like. I think for
Hmm.
whatever reason, and I would say she's up there with Varys and Tyrion and that as one of my favorite characters, but not because and I think it is actually partially because it's like she's one of those characters that doesn't get as much screen time as the Westeros characters.
Hmm.
And that kind of helps because I think it's a case of if you showed her too much, then it would kind of be grating, especially season 2 in Karth.
Yeah.
If they'd overdone that, that would have been so annoying, and so many people would have started to hate her. And a
Yeah.
lot of people do hate
There is
her,
that.
but still,
Yeah, there is actually a good explanation for that, but we'll talk about that when we discuss season two.
yeah. So,
All
on
right.
behalf for this podcast, a podcast of Ice and Fire. We will see you next time. Probably it'll depend on availability, but we'll try to get the next episode done pretty much as soon as possible. So we've got all 4 done by the time season 5 starts. So on behalf of myself and Graham, we will see you next time.
All right. Peace.